The weather was frigid on the final day of play in the regular season of 1942 when the Pittsburgh Steelers traveled to Milwaukee to play the Green Bay Packers. There was a new innovation by Coach Curly Lambeau of the Packers that day. It was so cold that he asked his reserves to stay in the locker room. Only the starters went out onto the field. This didn't catch on very well, but it did promote the use of better sideline gear for the players that were sitting out there. I mean, there's more of them in a normal NFL game today than there are out on the field. Well, Timothy B. Brown joins us today to talk about football archaeology's tidbit on sideline gear and its evolution. And there's some interesting things. Tim's up in just a moment to tell us all about it.
This is the Pigskin Daily History Dispatch, a podcast that covers the anniversaries of American football events throughout history. Your host, Darren Hayes, is podcasting from America's North Shore to bring you the memories of the gridiron, one day at a time.
Hello, my football friends. This is Darren Hayes of pigskindispatch.com. Welcome once again to the Pig Pen, your portal to positive football history. And welcome once again to a Tuesday when we get to talk with Timothy B. Brown of footballarchaeology.com and see what's on his mind in the light of gridiron history. Tim, welcome back to the Pig Pen.
Hey, Darren. Looking forward to chatting about jackets and capes and parkas and visors.
And visors. That's a very interesting visor here. We've seen that the last couple episodes, and I've been waiting to ask you about it. And happy that we're going to be talking about it tonight because you have a tidbit that you wrote called The Good Old Days of Sideline Gear. So why don't you share that with us?
Yeah, so I'll set the stage just by saying that, now I've got something on the order of 90 old football catalogs. Some of them are
the wife hasn't kicked you out of the house yet?
No, they're nicely contained. And
okay.
Now that 90 includes PDF versions only that I've found out there on the interweb.
Gotcha.
So if I can find a PDF, I'm perfectly happy as long as, decent quality. So anyways, in going through all of those, they're offering, all the wares that are available for football teams and basketball teams and wrestling teams and whatever are in these catalogs. And so, there was a point where I decided, wouldn't it be fun to just look at all the things that they've offered over the years on the gear that players wore when they were on the sideline? I've written a lot of things about the gear they wear during games and even in training, but what do they wear on the sideline? And so, you got to remember that in the old days, they didn't play indoors, at least not very often. So you didn't have like I'm in the Detroit area, so a place like Ford Field didn't exist, right? And a lot of NFL games, fair number of college games are played indoors nowadays. And so that wasn't an option then. So they were playing outdoors in any weather conditions that might arise. They were seated on wooden benches. And because there were limited substitutions, you didn't get off the bench very often. So if you were there at the beginning of the game, you were likely there at the end of the game, unless you were getting beaten badly or somebody had been injured, etc. And then you were also wearing, canvas or moleskin pants, which are cotton fibers, and so they get wet and they retain moisture. They get wet either because it's a wet field or because you're sweating, because you're working out. And likely either a cotton shirt or earlier on, wool, jersey. So, you're not wearing these like really nice, keep you warm kind of synthetic things that, breathe properly. And oftentimes you were at a place where there were no locker rooms at the football field. So, when you walked out there, you were out there for the next, 2 hours, and typically games are shorter, but still you were going to get cold if it was a cold day. And so, until probably 1920, most football teams, if you were sitting on the bench, they basically gave you a blanket. and you wrapped yourself in a blanket, and that's what you had to stay warm. Um, and the players who were in the game who came out at halftime, they would get a blanket too, and they'd wrap themselves up in the blanket. And there's images, in fact, there's some in that tidbit of guys laying on the ground at halftime, listening to the coach talk to them, wrapped up in a blanket.
Hmm.
So sideline gear was blankets, for quite a while. In the 20s, you start seeing warm-up jackets and parkas, wool parkas. So there's some cool images out there. Red Grange is wearing, kind of like the jackets that baseball coaches and managers, used to wear.
Hmm.
Um, and so it's kind of along those lines, but football players used to wear those things too, and they'd warm up in them. And then like if you played for like the Duluth Eskimos, then you might wear this wool parka that went, halfway, or basically went down to your
They,
knees.
they got a parka and a blanket probably up
Yeah.
in Duluth.
Um, so it transitioned to, more of a jacket sort of situation. Um, and then in the 1940s, then we start having, the second half of the 40s, you have two platoon football. So now all of a sudden, if there's a turnover or just a change of possession, now the guy who's sitting on the bench has to jump into the game. So you don't want him having a jacket on with buttons, that have to be, or zippers that have to be taken off and pull the sleeves out and all that kind of stuff. So basically all the sideline gear transitioned to those capes that, I mean, I remember, using those capes, when I was playing or, coaching and stuff. And, um, so it was like one or two snaps and poof, you could pop it off and, run out there on the field and go conquer all. So, um, and then, so anyways, that stuff, there's still, if it's an outdoor game, you'll still see, some of the NFL playoff games, you'd see guys wearing capes. Mahomes was wearing a cape on the sidelines and, for some of the cold weather games and things, indoors, you don't have to do that.
I think they sort of made a resurgence here the last couple of years, the capes, because I remember 1970s, it seems like everybody was wearing them, when it got cold out.
Yeah.
But guys, like you say, there's more indoor stadiums now than there were in the 70s. But I don't remember seeing them very often in the 90s and the earlier in the 2000s.
Yeah.
The last 2 years, it seems like I've seen a lot of pro players and college players not sitting on those heated benches, but they have the capes, like you said, Mahomes
Yeah.
recently in the playoffs.
Well, you got heated benches. You can put your helmet on a heater, I mean, so it's a little bit different world. I mean, they didn't have campfires on the sidelines, back in the 19 teens. But one other thing on sideline gear that I got a kick out of was baseball hats. And so I had it in my mind that the whole quarterback, the backup quarterback with the clipboard wearing a visor or a baseball cap, I had in my mind that was kind of a 1980s thing. And
Mm.
I think that probably was when it kind of generally came into use. Um, but this is a picture of, I think it's 1932. So here's this goofy looking visor that, you know, I forget who this is. It's like SMU or somebody like that, somebody in the South. And, you know, wearing visors on the sideline. And, I've got another picture that's, I think, in the tidbit, uh, where it's like Georgia Tech running out of the tunnel in like 1947, and everybody's wearing a baseball cap, you know, like the whole team, doesn't matter your position, you're wearing a baseball cap. So somehow like that whole cap and visor thing went back a little bit further than like what I had imagined. But it's only from looking through like yearbooks and whatnot that, you end up finding pictures like this going, what the heck are they doing with baseball caps or visors on the sideline? They're not supposed to have those till the 1980s. Well, in fact, they had them a lot longer than we think.
And they're pretty interesting visors in that, having almost a suspension
Yeah.
mechanism to them,
Well, it looks like they're all bookies. So maybe there's a little bit of gambling going on,
Could
with
be.
that team. I don't know. playing the numbers.
Yeah. But the guy in the middle closest to behind coach's fedora there looks like I don't know
Yeah,
if that's a visor. His looks more like a more modern day
yeah,
visor that we were.
he's got a different look. So yeah, I'm not sure. I didn't.
He was the bookie that lost the bet. You know?
Yeah,
The other guy's got the nice leather ones or whatever they are.
yeah. So, anyways, I mean, it's just interesting the way equipment evolves, and it's not just the game or on-field equipment. It's also it's all their practice gear. It's all the sideline gear. You know, and beyond. In addition to all the fan paraphernalia that has come on since the 1980s.
Well, that's definitely an important part of the game that, especially us fans of today that are watching more games on television, which hardly ever show close-ups to the sidelines. Back in the 1930s, all you could do is go to a game and watch it in person. And just seeing the creature comforts of these players and that aren't playing but have to suit up and be out in the elements. Just interesting to see some of that, and I'm glad you bring that to light because it's really an important part of football history. And you do this quite often in your tidbits, Tim, and we really appreciate that. And maybe you could tell the listeners how they can watch or read your tidbits and your interesting comments on football history.
Yeah, it's just footballarchaeology.com. It's a Substack site, and subscribe. You can do free subscriptions. There's paid subscriptions that just give you access to, everything basically. And then, yeah, I mean, you can also follow me on Blue Sky at, Football Archaeology is the name. And, and if nothing else, just go out and take a look at the site every so often, if that's kind of the way that you consume media.
It's definitely worth the trip to go and check all those different avenues to see your articles and the images that you post, which are so awesome. And folks, you can, anytime you're listening to these podcasts where we have Tim on or on YouTube, you can follow the links in the show notes and go right to his site on that particular article and see what Tim's talking about and what inspired him to write his tidbit. And Tim, we really appreciate you coming on today. Appreciate you visiting us each Tuesday, and we can't wait to see what you have next week for us.
Look forward to it as always. Thanks.
That's all the football history we have today, folks. Join us back tomorrow for more of your football history. We invite you to check out our website, pigskinddispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. Pigskinddispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. Special thanks to the talents of Mike and Jean Monroe, as well as Jason Neff for letting us use their music during our podcast.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.